A no does not hide anything, but a yes very easily becomes a deception. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Be that self that one is. Boredom is the root of all evil. The despairing refusal to be oneself. Confidence is the present tense of hope. Cultivate the will. This is the armor that preserves the mind. Do it or don't do it, you will regret both. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. Faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off. Faith is the highest passion in a man. Far from the idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. For it is not what happens to me that makes me great, but it is what I do. For without risk there is no faith, and the greater the risk, the greater the faith. Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. Hope is a passion for the possible. I opened my eyes and saw the real world, and I began to laugh, and I haven't stopped since. I would rather be a swineherd, understood by the swine, than a poet misunderstood by men. If you don't have many friends, that means you have a lot of life experience. If you want to be loathsome to God, just run with the herd. It is better to get lost in the passion than to lose the passion. It is better to try something and fail than to try nothing and succeed. The result may be the same, but you won't be. We always grow more through defeats than victories. It is impossible to exist without passion. It is not the path which is the difficulty, rather, it is the difficulty which is the path. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. It is very important in life to know when your cue comes. Knowledge is a wealth that cannot be stolen. Leap of faith. Yes, but only after reflection. Learn not to tell anything to anyone, because only then your life will definitely get better. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Life has become a bitter drink to me, and yet it must be taken in drops, counted one by one. Life has its own hidden forces which you can only discover by living. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Man always hopes for what he should remember, and forever remembers what he should hope for. Many of us pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that we hurry past it. Most people are subjective toward themselves and objective toward all others, frightfully objective sometimes. But the task is precisely to be objective toward oneself and subjective toward all others. My sorrow is my castle. My standpoint is armed neutrality. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. On the secretly blushing cheek is reflected the glow of the heart. Once you are born in this world, you're old enough to die. Once you label me, you negate me. Only the noble of heart are called to difficulty. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. Our life is a game of whose rules we don't know. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. Sleeping is the height of genius. You must love yourself properly. Take a chance and you may lose. Take not a chance and you have lost already. Take away the paradox from the thinker and you have a professor. The best response to criticism is to smile and forget. The door to happiness opens outward. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. The highest, after all, is not to comprehend the highest, but to do it. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. The more people who believe something, the more apt it is to be wrong. The person who's right often has to stand alone. The more silent you are, the more you are able to hear. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. The only intelligent tactical response to life's horror is to laugh defiantly at it. The question is not to be or not to be, it is what we should be until we are not. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. The thing that cowardice fears most is decision. The truth is a trap. You cannot get it without it getting you. You cannot get the truth by capturing it, only by its capturing you. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true, the other is to refuse to believe what is true. Therefore, do not deceive yourself. Of all deceivers, fear most yourself. To be a woman is something so strange, so confusing, and so complicated that only a woman could put up with it. To be human is not a fact, but a task. To be lost in spiritlessness is the most terrible thing of all. To dare. To lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. We pretend to be unable to understand life because we know very well that the minute we understand, we are obliged to act accordingly. We were given the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, but if this commandment is correctly understood, then you can read in it the opposite. What distinguishes all love from lust is the fact that it bears an impression of eternity. What if everything in the world were a misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? What is youth? A dream. What is love? The dream's content. Wherever there is a crowd, there is untruth. Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. Why bother remembering a past that cannot be made into a present? You become what you understand.